In this video, we're going to use the Grok API to create a Google Workspace add-on to manage your email and actually function as an AI assistant. I actually saw that Google just rolled out Gemini in Gmail, so to not feel redundant and hopefully add additional value and just help you build tools that are useful in your life, I'm going to show you a few different things here. So as you can see, this tool pings the Grok API. It generates an email response. You could insert draft if that looks good. You could also refresh. So heading over to drafts, refreshing that, and you'll see the response is added. Sometimes, like in my workflow, I have a thread that's super deep, like it goes back months, and want to talk about it with the team. So one additional idea is view thread as a doc. And so when you click that view thread as a doc button, it creates a Google Doc version of the thread and segments based on who sent the email and provides the body copy of those emails. And this can just be helpful for, as I mentioned, deep threads. And maybe you would comment and tag someone in to discuss, or even draft the next email response in this doc. And of course, you could use AI and Gemini to help draft that email. So let's get into how to build this. So the first thing you need to know is that this does require a Google Cloud account. And I'm going to walk you through the entire process of setting this up and building a Google Workspace add-on. If you want to jump ahead and you're already familiar with this process, feel free to do so. I'll put some timestamps in there. So we're going to add a new project. I'm going to call it AI Email Assistant. Select that project and go to the helpful sidebar, and we're going to enable some APIs to start. The first one will be people. Search that, the People API. Enable that one. We're also going to enable the Gmail API. So enable that. I'm going to go into this folder, and while that's working, I'm going to create a Google AppScript project. So with this blank document, the first thing I'm going to do is actually go to project settings and enable the appsscript.json. So this checkbox here to show the manifest file in the editor. Okay, so now we need to create credentials for an oAuth client ID, configure consent screen. So we're going to say AI email assistant is the app name. I'll put my email address for the user support. I'm going to make this internal, and you could choose to make it external. I don't know what other hoops you have to jump through. We'll again put my email address. This is an inbox I very rarely check, which is why I don't mind sharing it. Feel free to email me if you have any questions. Okay, so now that we've created the oAuth consent screen, I think we'll be in a good place to now create an oAuth client ID. I believe you can do this from credentials, create oAuth client ID. So yeah, we kind of just went around about, but just showing you two ways to potentially do that. I'm going to select web application and just keep everything the same and click create. And now I'm going to go to the vertical dots here, go to project settings. And I'm going to copy this project number, and back over in the project settings, we're going to change project to Google Cloud project. We'll set up that connection between this Google AppScript and the Google Cloud project that I just set up. Let's add some services here as well. So I believe Gmail, let's add that, and that will update the AppScript. I also will need the People API, and that should update that as well. And it does. So the first thing I want to show you is how to call the Grok API. I'm just going to call this function Grok, and I'm going to say const API key is equal to, and go back to the API, log in here, go to console, create an API key, test key, delete later, save that. And now we have the API key that I will delete later. We're also going to say const URL equals, I really like the docs that xAI has. They have a really handy migration from other providers. And since I've used OpenAI in previous videos and Gemini, this was really helpful for me to just see how easy it is. Basically, all you need to do is update the API key and the base URL, and basically that's it. So the URL is this /chat/completions, which is pretty similar to other APIs that we've used in the past. The payload is also quite similar in that it's an object. You pass in the model, which is currently Grok 2 latest. And when they come out with the Grok 3 API, which obviously is big news in the AI industry, just given the results that they've achieved in testing. So excited for that, and figure, that'll be an easy update. You'll just plug in the new model here, and everything else should function unless they fundamentally change the API, which I don't see them doing. So you pass in a system role and content saying you are a helpful email assistant. I like to add additional context of like, what am I expecting? So maybe it's like, here is the entire email thread for context. We'll do that in a bit, but for now, let's just say user, what is the meaning of life? I think that's the sample that they provide. We'll say options is another object with method post. So we're gonna send a post request to the endpoint. Content type, application /JSON. Headers is an object with authorization, bearer plus API key that we just saved. And finally, the payload will stringify the payload that we just created above. We'll write a try and catch block, and we'll catch an error, and we'll say return error, and we'll say error.message. Const response is equal to, this is where we use the URL fetch app.fetch method in appsscript. We'll pass in the URL, the endpoint, and we'll pass in the options that describes what we want to do with that. We'll also create a JSON to store the get content text from the response, and we'll say const data equals json.parse the JSON. And finally, let's just log the data and see what we're getting back, and hopefully we're getting something. So Command S to save that. The Grok function is selected. Command R to run it. You got to review permissions. It'll need to connect to an external service. Continue. And let's try that again. Let's just double check everything looks good. Oh God, really? Okay. So I misspelled application JSON. How verbose you must be and how accurate you must be in coding. AI would have caught that error much sooner than I. Now that we know that's working, let's get some information from the end user and pass it in. So like the email thread, the context of the previous email, and the user's name. So we'll update these messages to say you are a helpful email assistant. Here is the entire email thread for context, passing in the entirety of the thread. And then we'll also say, here's the previous email in the thread. And then for additional context, and so you only respond on my behalf, I am, and we're gonna get the user's name from the Peopleapi. That's why I connected that. And then finally, please draft an email response based on the context provided in the previous email without the subject line or signature and only the body of the email. So now let's work on getting that function. We're going to say get name. We're also going to say function get current email. And that's going to take in an event. We need to do some helpful functions and get some information from that event. Message metadata. I have to give a huge shout out to the Google developer team for some GitHub projects that I'll link to that kind of led me down this path and how to do this. We're going to get the message ID, which is going to be the event, again, message metadata dot message ID. We're also going to get the email ID, which will be from the Gmail app dot get message by ID, passing in the message ID that we just instantiated, get ID. We're also going to get the thread ID, which will be the event.metadata.thread ID. And we'll say let thread equal Gmail app get thread by ID, passing in the thread ID. And we're going to get the messages that will get the entirety of the thread. We're also going to say Gmail app dot set current message access token to that access token. And and we could probably put that up here. If you want to know how to do that, just Option on a line and then hold Option and click the up or down arrow. We'll also say let body equal Gmail app dot get messages by ID, message by ID, again the message ID, and we'll say get plain body. You can, if you say get body, it gets the HTML version of the email, and that was, I found difficult to work with. More on that later. We'll also say let name equal get name. We're gonna write a for loop. We're gonna let I equal 0, I is less than thread.length, I++, and in this for loop, we're going to basically say thread and the ith thread. Let's get the from, that's the email address and name of the from who the email was from initially. And we'll also create some empty arrays and message. Now we can say source.push for each email in the thread, who's it from? And similarly, we'll say message.push thread, the ith thread, get plain body. I'm also gonna paste in a helpful function that I had AI write for me. And here's the prompt that I used in case you wanted to see. But because the email, even the plain body, is not very clean, I just wrote some, or had AI write some regex to replace some of those like bad formatting and simply return once all of those were updated. So now we can pass this through the parse email body helper function, and that should be pretty helpful. We also want to say let response equal Grok thread body and name. We're going to say const section is equal to card service dot new card section dot set header, and this will be, so you actually pass through a string with HTML for this to work. We're going to create an insert draft button, and this is how we'll pass the AI generated email to the drafts. We'll say card service dot new text button on set on click action, card service dot new action, set function name, and you pass it in as a string. So insert draft, and we'll create that function in a second. We're going to set the parameters, and you pass in an object with email ID to setting that to the email ID, and then response to the response from Grok. And finally, we will set the text to insert draft. That's the text of the button. And we'll say const card is equal to card service dot new card builder, set the header. So this is the main header of the card service dot new card header dot set title AI generated response, and I like to set the subtitle to the response. We'll also add a section, and then we'll call the section that we just added. We'll add a widget, we'll pass in the card service dot new button set, and we will add a button, insert draft button. And finally, we need to say dot build for that to work, and we will return the card. Okay, let's get the get name function. So I'm just going to paste in this function, and basically it's a try catch where you call the session.getActiveUser.get email, and also the people API, people.people.get. I know it's confusing, but that's how it is. And you get the person fields. This will return the display name. So for me, it would be Drew Page. Otherwise, it'll return the email for me, which would be drew@greetings.com. And then if it fails, we'll log that error and return it. Command S to save that. Okay, now we need to update the appsscript.json. Okay, I'm gonna put a comma here and paste in. So it's a Gmail. This is the name. This is a logo, an icon actually that I got from the Google Docs. You can hopefully update this icon with another link if you want to use that. And basically this contextual triggers will, anytime the email is open and you click on the icon, it will call the get current email function and it'll trigger that. We also need the oAuth scopes, and there's quite a few of them. Again, you can go down into my GitHub link below where I saved all of this documentation for you. Hopefully that's helpful. But if you want to get those, and if you run into errors, and you be sure to read them, and if it says additional authorization required, and it'll most likely tell you what's missing. Let's say AI email assistant, name the project. Okay, for this to work, we need to go to deploy, test deployments, and you'll need to install this application. And now in Gmail, if we refresh, you'll have to authorize access, continue, allow all of those oAuth scopes. And something broke, but at least we're up and running. You can refresh, but let's go back to the code and see line 45, what potentially broke here. Okay, so the issue we're running into is that in the Grok function, when we were testing it, we were logging out the response. We need to return it. Command S to save that. Back over here, let's refresh, and amazing. It has put the response in here, and there's a button to insert the draft. We'll see if that works. Email drafted successfully. We'll go back to drafts. Oh, and it's in here. Pretty solid email. Now let's do the part about creating a new doc and putting the thread in there. Actually, I'll just send it. What we'll do is we will create a new create thread doc button. And that's going to be pretty similar to this. So let's just copy and paste. We're going to create a new function called create doc. That doesn't need to actually take in any parameters. We will set the text to be view thread as doc. And down here, we will need to also add another button. We're going to just string together another add widget where we take in this, and now we'll say create thread doc button instead. So string those widgets together, and now let's create the create doc function. I'm actually going to copy some of this code that we already wrote because this comes in handy in here as well. The access token, the message ID, we don't need the email ID, thread, we will get one new title. We don't need the name, we don't need the body for this. So Gmail app, get messages by ID, message ID, and then we'll say get subject. So that's how we'll name the document, and we will create a doc using the document app.create. We'll pass in that title, and then we'll get the ID of the document for later use. So we have that function. We're pushing it again to that source. Same parse email body to get the text a little bit cleaner. And now we'll say let j equal 0. J is also going to be less than thread.length. We'll iterate over j. Document app open by ID. We'll pass in that doc, which is the doc ID. Get the body, append a paragraph, and in that paragraph we'll say source j. Because we want that to be a little bit different formatting, we're going to say set heading. So we'll say document app paragraph heading dot heading 1, all caps there, just to format who the email is from in the document. Similarly, basically copy this, and now we'll say message j, the jth message, and we'll append a horizontal line, which will just make it a little bit better formatting. And that is the create doc function. So now I believe if everything is deployed in the test environment, we're all installed. If we go back over here, refresh this, we now have the view doc as thread, and let's see what the error is there. So we're getting the event here in a few places, and we actually do need to pass in that event. We don't need to pass it through as a parameter, just FYI. Let's refresh, make sure everything's working. View thread as doc. Now, as you can see, the thread has been added with the formatting. A new line, horizontal rule was added. I hope this was a helpful overview on a few things, how to use the Grok API within Google Docs and Google AppScript, as well as creating a Google Workspace add-on, which really allows you to open source your work for others to use. And if you make something useful, you should share it with the world. And hopefully you found this video part of that ethos and process. And I hope you leave a comment, subscribe, like this video if you want more content like this. And thank you for your interest in automating away your repetitive tasks.